49ers update. We're talking about the profit that the 49ers have been able to secure with this trade of Brian Robinson. Oh, look, Lombardi herself off to the races. I show up to Franklin, Tennessee here for just a few hours, and the 49ers make a big move. And now it's golden hour, and we can talk about this trade. San Francisco, over the course of this offseason, has jettisoned Jordan Mason via trade, a move that a lot of people seem to complain about, but now they have a running back at 40% of the cost because Washington is picking up $1.25 million of Brian Robinson Jr.'s salary. That means the 49ers are paying only $2.16 million, and Jordan Mason is making over $5 million this season. So they've got a running back at 40% of the cost on the cap. And remember that through the Jordan Mason trade earlier this offseason, the 49ers, there was a pick swap there with Minnesota where they were able to get a fifth-round pick that they've used on Marquise Siegel, who is the safety out of Kansas State, who looks like he's going to start for this football team. You can even expand the range of this trade analysis even further since the 49ers dealt Deebo Samuel to Washington earlier this offseason and put it in the context of one of those crazy NBA three-team trades. This is the scorecard. 49ers get Brian Robinson. They get Jordan James. They acquired him with the fifth rounder they got from Washington for Deebo Samuel. They get Marquise Siegel. They acquire him through a fifth rounder that came from Minnesota as part of the Jordan Mason trade. And they also get another extra sixth round pick, which came by way of Minnesota in that Jordan Mason trade. In the whole three-team process, the Commanders get Deebo Samuel. They get a 2026 sixth rounder. And the Vikings get Jordan Mason and some late round pick ammo from San Francisco as part of that whole pick swap. In all, when we look at that three-team setup that's taken a while to blossom over the course of the offseason, 49ers have saved about $20 million of cap space by offloading Deebo's contract and by offloading Jordan Mason's contract, replacing that with cheaper numbers for somebody like Brian Robinson Jr. Business 101. Now, this is obviously something that happened in a roundabout fashion. Did the 49ers know that they were going to trade for Brian Robinson back when they traded away Jordan Mason? No, but they were following sound process every step of the way. Sound process is taking an undrafted free agent running back who did a lot of good stuff in your system, but may not have been the best fit because his receiving ability wasn't all too great. Taking that guy, packaging him for a trade that essentially gets you an extra fifth-round pick, which is what happened with Jordan Mason. That's good business, right? You follow that process through the offseason. You know that you can replace Jordan Mason with the way that Kyle Shanahan has coached up and used these running backs. You know that you can replace him either through the NFL draft or, if you need to, potentially through the trade market. And, you know, the initial replacement for Jordan Mason, and still might be moving forward, is a rookie named Jordan James, who's actually from this area. You saw Lombardi herself rip it off on the four-wheeler a little bit earlier. Jordan James, 49ers rookie running back out of Oregon, actually went to the same high school as Margot here in this Middle Tennessee area. And he's going to be back from his broken finger soon. He's built like Devontae Freeman. He's a good all-around back, but doesn't have quite the burst that the 49ers have now acquired with Brian Robinson Jr. I think initially the 49ers would have been okay having Patrick Taylor Jr. take that Robinson or take the spot vacated by Jordan Mason, but now it's Brian Robinson taking that spot. So they get to the trade by necessity because they start seeing all these injuries in the running back room, not only to Patrick Taylor Jr., but also to Corey Kiner. Jeff Wilson Jr., an option for San Francisco, but I don't think that he is in his physical prime anymore. We've seen Jeff drop a couple passes, miss on some pass blocking attempts during the game against the Raiders on Saturday. So the 49ers really wanted to raise the ceiling of the running back room if they could find it at a decent price. And at the cost of a sixth-round pick, they have acquired Robinson. So what exactly does he bring to the table that somebody like Mason didn't, that somebody like, I think, Patrick Taylor didn't bring to the table? Well, just look at the receiving stats. Robinson and Mason have both been in the NFL for 3 years. Robinson, 65 catches, 587 yards. Jordan Mason, only 14 catches, and most of that damage came in one season last year for 122 yards. If you want to get a little further into the weeds here and measure the efficiency on the receiving end by the actual number of routes run, in 2023, Robinson's best season as a receiver, he was 1.68 yards per route run. Christian McCaffrey at his very best is about 1.8 yards per route run. So Robinson in his best season was putting up receiving efficiency numbers that were similar to CMC's. I'm not saying that he's CMC, I'm saying that he's capable of catching the football out of the backfield, which is obviously massive for Shanahan in this offense. Jordan Mason in 2024, which was the season that he saw the most routes, was only 0.54 yards per route run, which ranks down near the bottom of any qualifying running back. So we know that Jordan Mason wasn't great out of the backfield. That was one of the big reasons why the 49ers were unwilling to retain him, even though he was a restricted free agent. Minnesota was fine with it, $5 million per year for Jordan Mason. Maybe he fits into that system better than he fits into the Shanahan system. Great for the Vikings, but the 49ers said, you know what, we can't go $5-6 million a year for a player. We'd rather take the draft capital, allows us to get somebody like Marquise Siegel. That was a downstream effect. And then they went replenishment through the rookie contract for Jordan James. That's a 5th round pick. And then obviously further replenishment now with this trade for Brian Robinson Jr. If you watch the tape in Washington, Robinson, he's 6'1", he's 225, he's got good burst. He's fast out of the gate. We talked about the 10-yard split. I think that's notable, that he and Sky Moore, they're obviously different positions, different builds, but both he and Sky Moore, in terms of their athletic profile coming out of that 2022 draft, were extremely fast out of the gate, don't have great agility movement, but they have been able to use that 10-yard speed to make some plays at the NFL level. I think in the case of Brian Robinson Jr., it has been more plays than in the case of Sky Moore, which is also why Brian Robinson was more expensive to acquire for the 49ers on the trade market. Nearly 800 rushing yards in each one of his 3 seasons to begin his NFL career. So this is a player with juice, a 26-year-old who's been able to run the football physically, I think with explosion, like I said, out of the burst, out of the gate, who's also been able to catch the ball out of the backfield. And that's what the 49ers want at the backup running back position. Christian McCaffrey is very likely going to be in the Hall of Fame one day. He's the number one, but McCaffrey has gotten hurt before. You also want to take some of a load off of Christian McCaffrey. One of the biggest issues, though, is that his direct backup, at least prior to this trade, Isaac Guerendo, has a much more troublesome injury history. So as soon as things get past McCaffrey, if it gets to Guerendo, well, the bottom can completely fall out if he too gets hurt. So that's why Kyle Shanahan has consistently wanted at least 4 running backs coupled with the fullback on his 53-man roster, because this is a position in a brutal sport, a violent physical sport that tends to see even more injuries on average than other spots. So now you've got Brian Robinson, and I don't think that Kyle looks at a running back depth chart, by the way, in the conventional fantasy football fashion. You know, a lot of people are arguing, is this a running back 2? Is this a running back 3? I think that you're going to see a lot of playing time for Robinson in certain situations. You're going to see quite a bit of playing time for Isaac Guerendo in certain situations. I think that Guerendo was a receiver to begin his college career at Wisconsin. You might see him split out wide into the slot a little bit more often than Robinson. We already see Christian McCaffrey split out into the slot quite a bit for the 49ers. You could run multiple backs on the field at the same time if you're San Francisco, because you're confident that all of these guys do bring some sort of threat in the receiving game. So that's the biggest thing to me, is that it's not running back 2, 3, 4. It's a running back room that Kyle Shanahan is now confident deploying in an adaptable fashion, and that's what makes the 49ers hard to defend, right? You could look at this cross-positionally. George Kittle, as a tight end, can line up out wide. He's lined up in the backfield too before, but obviously he can be an inline blocker. So when George Kittle is in the huddle, the defense is not sure how he's going to break the huddle and what exactly he's going to do out on the field. Same thing with these running backs. You can have two of them in the huddle, or even if you just have one, you can't telegraph. If you're a defense, you can't really telegraph what exactly is going to happen because there is a versatile skill set there. That's why the 49ers liked Brian Robinson Jr. He showed that receiving ability, especially in 2023. He's shown consistent rushing ability. I don't think he's been a great runner. I think he's a very downhill kind of back. I don't think that the agility makes him an elite runner, but putting up close to 800 yards in 3 straight seasons in this league is no joke, right? And that is something that the 49ers can absolutely use as a complementary piece. Obviously, Washington didn't find the same usage anymore as their offense evolved under Jaden Daniels for Brian Robinson Jr. 49ers found a ability here for a low risk commitment. Yes, there is a solid chance that Washington would have cut Brian Robinson Jr., but that's the point of trades like this. Sky Moore was in the same boat for Kansas City. You want to cut in line with a nominal amount of draft capital in a trade. So for Sky Moore, it was essentially free. It was a 6-7 pick swap in 2027. When you look at the business cost of this, well, it was a 6th round pick, a little bit more expensive, coming up here in the next draft, the 2026 NFL draft. But still, that's not even a mid-round level of draft compensation. And in a very key development, the 49ers were able to get Washington to pick up $1.25 million of Brian Robinson's salary. So that leaves $2.16 million for the 49ers to shoulder on their salary cap. Yes, every million matters. Don't let anybody tell you that the 49ers, they could spend an extra here, they could spend a little bit extra there, and it won't matter. It will. This kind of stuff adds up. It has added up over the years. They're trying to preserve the A-list core of this roster for as long as is feasible and as long as it's efficient to do so with the performance of those A-list players. And to do that, you can't overspend at any of the non-marquee A-list spots. And backup running back, which is where Brian Robinson Jr. is going to be, that is not a spot for marquee A-list spending. You spent your big money at running back last offseason with the big Christian McCaffrey extension. And that's great for the 49ers. I think that he's looking awesome in training camp right now. Obviously, year one of that extension wasn't good with the Achilles injury, but there's still a lot of football left to be played. And McCaffrey's going to be the lead back in that room, and they've got some talent there. Now, you look at receiver being as thin as it is for the 49ers. Sky Moore, I've been very consistent from the start. I've said this is a ceiling of a gadget weapon who can really help the 49ers on special teams. I've used Ray McLeod as my comp. I know that he's probably going to have a larger role early if a lot of guys are out. But if you're talking about bolstering a depleted receiver room, all the injuries there are a big problem for the 49ers. If that's your big focus, right, you have to also look at the fact that the 49ers run so much 21, 22 personnel, not as much 22, but a lot of 21, a lot of 12 personnel, which means either 2 backs or 2 tight ends in a formation, which also means only 2 wide receivers. They don't run as much 3 wide as other teams. And I say that to emphasize that the replacement plan for receiver, when that room is particularly injured, has to be viewed through the lens of the running back room as well, and through the lens of the tight end room as well. Because George Kittle takes a lot of pressure off that receiving room. Christian McCaffrey takes a lot of pressure off that receiving room. Guess who else can help do that? Brian Robinson Jr., Isaac Guerendo. The formations that the 49ers use, especially early in this season, if a lot of these wideouts like Jawan Jennings indeed are not available for the season opener against the Seattle Seahawks, you'll see Kyle Shanahan get in his bag. You'll see George Kittle taking on an outsized load. I think you'll see Isaac Guerendo playing out wide for the 49ers. You'll see wheel routes out of the backfield. You'll see Brock Purdy focusing on Brian Robinson Jr. working out of that backfield. So there are still dynamic weapons in this 49ers offense, young, dynamic, exciting weapons who aren't necessarily part of the official wide receiving core. And I think that given the positionless adaptability that Shanahan has striven to install over the course of his entire decade now with the 49ers, that's something that absolutely must be discussed. In the big picture, we're going to go check out sunset and golden hour here in Tennessee before I take a 6:45 a.m. flight back to San Francisco tomorrow. I have to take that early of a flight tomorrow because the game, Trey Lance, Jim Harbaugh, that's happening. And the 49ers probably won't see somebody like Brian Robinson Jr. I do think that we're going to see Sky Moore. It's going to be the final tune-up for the 49ers to make final determinations on this 53-man roster and 16-man practice squad. So they are as locked and loaded as possible for the start of the season. And the overarching goal, once the season starts, ties right into the two trades that we've seen this week. The overarching goal is to make this offense as explosive as possible so that it can be what carries this football team. They've tried to get younger on defense. I mean, they're retooling this whole thing defensively. They got way too old there. And they have a new defensive coordinator who's a returning guy in Robert Saleh who can rebuild this once again. So, you know, even in the Jordan Mason trade where they got the 5th round pick and they ended up using it on Marquise Siegel, you could see that focus on the youth movement defensively. But offensively, they want veterans pressing in even into depth roles to make sure that that side of the football can truly carry the torch and lead the way for the 49ers. You've got Purdy, you've got Kittle, you've got Christian McCaffrey. They're going to get Brandon Ayuk back, Trent Williams along that offensive line, Kyle Juszczyk. You have all that, but then you also have this injury rash that they've been dealing with over the course of training camp. So you've got to make sure that you're bolstered at all these positions to make sure that offense is an absolute unit. So both 49ers trades this week for Sky Moore and for Brian Robinson Jr. have been part of the 49ers' insistence to keep this offense at a high level. Even last year, it was at a top half level with all those injuries. Well, now the 49ers realize that maybe 2023 is unattainable without Brandon Ayuk, with some of the injuries that they've dealt with, but they could build the depth now so this offense can peak at the right time and really be the leader of this team as we move further into the fall. Good stuff. We're going to be headed back to California. We're going to sign off now. Talking business from the farm.